I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Creek Devil. I thought it would be interesting to have, Forrest as an anthropologist discuss with Fred the things that he'd experienced. So Fred, if you don't mind, maybe give us, kind of go back into the things that, you've experienced, and then later on in the segment, we'll go ahead and do updates if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I grew up, I'm an Alaskan native. I grew up traditionally, subsistence lifestyle. We were always told, never turn your back on the woods. Don't whistle in the woods. The hairy man will take you and whatnot. And, all those stories, I was kind of a savvy kid. And so I kind of thought it was like, it's just a way to keep us out of the woods until I saw a figure in the willows that screamed at me, shaking trees. And that made it real. But the screaming on the bluff in 1983 when a hairy man was throwing rocks at the fishing boat, we were stuck on a little gravel bar, that made it pulled it all into the reality of like, holy crap, it's far more than just something off in the distance. You know what I mean? It made it very real. But throughout some experiences between then and 2006, it had always been like an aggressive branch breaking distraction type of behavior. And then in 2006, went up to the Nuyahkuk River. It had been planned out a couple years ahead of time, and we were going up gold prospecting. And we were only there a couple of hours before it got dark. And no sooner than it got dark, we were basically, in 2020 hindsight, it seemed like they were trying to lure us out because the whole place creaked. We stepped out with the spotlight we thought it was a bear. And we're sweeping across to our left to figure out where this bear went to run it off. And we saw 3 sets of eye shine, and they were as big as fence post markers. These creatures were huge. So immediately we were a step out the door. We get back inside, and I shut the little J-hook, and this little shack we were in is literally 8 foot square, and it had this little 50 style trailer attached to the back of it for kind of like a blackened out bunk area for the fish and game observers or whatever, because it was an old salmon counting tower. Well, once we saw that, we jumped back inside, and my cousin was off my left shoulder, and I was trying to talk to him, and it was so muffled in the room. It was almost like trying to talk with hearing protection on. And all of a sudden, he was underneath this little card table, locked up with a death grip on the barrel of the 30-06. And he was staring across the room to the other window. And I'm literally like 3 feet away from that window, still holding the shotgun in my hand, when I turned and looked. And at the same time I made my eyes contacted with this creature through the window, it turned and looked at me from staring at him. And then autopilot took over, and I shot 3 times through the wall. There was a loud scream. The whole place shifted, and I thought we were going in the river. It was time standing still doesn't quite express the hours after that of just silence, because no one was really communicating with me, and it was a mental torture. I had to sit there and resign myself to death basically just to stop trembling. And it was still it still bothers me to this day, but it's getting better sharing and whatnot. But so as we're sitting there, my cousin starts communicating with me again. I got him off the floor. He was babbling a little bit, kind of incoherently at first. Finally got him back to me, so to speak, mentally, because it was hard with these people that I loved and respected that were hardcore outdoorsmen, all of a sudden just shut down. Like it still bothers me because it ruined our relationship. But so once he starts talking to me again, we decide we're getting our escape plan going because we could just feel something was wrong in the air. When we were discussing our game plan, he brought up let's spotlight, because we were going to leave in the dark, even though everything in us was like it's real dangerous to try to go boating out of somewhere in the pitch black. But anyway, sorry, my mind gets caught up in those moments sometimes. So we decide we're going to beam out the window, and you got to remember hours had passed since I shot through the wall. About a little over a handful, I would guesstimate, because it's kind of hard because of the sheer terror going through my mind the whole time. Exactly how many hours I sat there in the quiet and pumping that damn Coleman lantern. I still to this day can't stand a light above me or that hiss of a lamp. But we beam out and we saw nothing until we were beaming on the side. We saw the eye shine. And as we swept back, we beamed this outhouse. And this outhouse is like 8.5 feet tall. There was this pitch black hulking figure that, it was absorbing the light. So in those moments, it was such a mental trying to grasp exactly what we're looking at. But it seemed like just this huge nothingness that was there for us. Like, I don't know. It's really hard to put into words the feeling of we're screwed. Like, so we killed the light. We're tucked back into that little cubby, and we got barrels crossed. We're not nowhere near our right minds, because I'm sure we were babbling to each other and not hearing a thing. It was just like a blur of panic. So anyway, after we calmed down a little bit, we were trying to figure out what we were going to do with our escape plan. And it sounded like off in the near distance, like rotor wash from a helicopter, a real low thumping sound, like the blades of a helicopter at a distance where you hear that thump, 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 thump sound. But it got louder and we were feeling it in the ground. And one of these things ran past the shack. And it was like they were all staged around it or something, because all of a sudden there was a bunch of that thumping and running around this shack. And I don't know, it seemed like every time we were trying to like formulate an escape plan or a game plan, some other form of terror would happen. And it's speculation in 2020 hindsight, but it almost felt like we were being toyed with, like they were feeding on the fear almost. Well, it started getting lighter and what have you, and we decide we got our game plan. We're going to make a break for it. And just as we were contemplating going out the door, we hear rocks start hitting the side of this shack, real small rocks, but it sounded like a pellet gun shooting it. And then it was like a hail fury of just, it almost sounded like a real strong hail on a metal roof, just hitting the side of this place. And that died down. Panic died down. It got real quiet. And we finally got up the nerve that, okay, we're going to go, because the skiff we had to get to was ready to go. We just had to drop it, fire it up, and go, because all our gas and everything was still in it. And it's literally 20 feet to the riverbank and like a 7-foot drop down to where the skip was. Not far. But in those moments of terror, it really did feel like it was miles and miles away, even though it was 4 large steps. You know what I mean? It just seemed like almost like an insurmountable distance. But as soon as we go out the door, it's dead quiet. My cousin's in front of me and Elder is behind me. And we get to the riverbank edge. He jumps down and I kind of stoop down to help the Elder catch his footing, because it was dew on the grass and it was a cut bank. So there was an erosion spot there. and I had to help him get his footing. Well, as he got his footing, I scooted back about 4 to 6 inches just to have a better foot placement when I stood up. And as I stood up, just as I got to full height, a huge rock, a little bigger than a basketball, just whizzed by my face. Had I not scooted back, that rock had to have already been in the air coming at me, which is another mind-boggling thing. Anyway, slow motion, my eyes lock on this rock, and it impacted the river so hard, it hit the bottom of the river real loud before the water could close over it. And then I turned the direction that the rock came from, and this big black mass was moving out of the trees, and I put 3 shots on it with the 30-06, and it didn't buckle. It didn't flinch. All I saw was the same big blackness, but I heard the bullets hit this thing. And then we ended up getting out of there, but it was it's something that drives me to this day, because there's so many unexplained things that happen. They could have smashed that place. They could have ripped us apart. There's just a whole, I don't know, just unanswered questions, basically.
Forrest, there's a lot of information in the last 10 minutes. What do you make of all that?
Man. Can I ask, Fred, what tribe are you from? Are you Athabascan, Inuit, or Tlingit, or what?
Aleut. Locally, it's
okay.
Sugak, yeah, Nushagak tribe.
Okay. The reason I'm asking, because I actually, when I was in Alaska, it was the first time I'd ever heard the term hairy man, and I had 2 friends that were Athabascan. So that's it seems to be a universal term used up there by all the tribes for Bigfoot. My idea about what might have been going on in the cabin is, have you ever watched when jackals or wolves or lions, sometimes, of course, lions usually make a direct hit, but you see some of these canine groups that when they go after multiple individuals, that they'll circle and taunt and snap, and it almost seems like an organized effort to have one individual panic and take off, and then it's easy for the group to take down that one individual. And I mean, that's what I was thinking. I had in my mind, I was visioning something like this happening when you were talking about the cabin situation. There was what, 3 or 4 of you in that cabin?
There was 3 of us, and you know, in the 2020 hindsight, like what caught our attention to go outside was the whole place creaked, like something of immense weight kind of pushed against it, kind of like a stiff wind would, but there was no wind. And you know, just the looking back on it, I feel we were lured out, and then we caught wind of them first and jumped back inside, and that kind of changed things. But of course, it's 2020 hindsight speculation. But
Hey, Forrest.
Well, it's all speculation, because I mean, none of us are mind readers, and nobody can automatically assume that you understand what they're thinking. But that was what I was envisioning. I was seeing jackals or wolves, you know, circling a group of multiple animals, prey animals, and that was exactly what I was thinking. Is that they were maybe hoping that one of you would panic and rush out and be able to grab one individual. And I think you kind of even the playing field when you fired into the wall, because they suddenly were aware of the fact that these guys have got those big boomers that, you know, create havoc and death. So you know, that right there I think created the confusion. But I think they were still had in their mindset that if they caused enough havoc and they created enough fear in y'all, that maybe one of you would bolt to the boat or whatever, and that they could, you know, snatch up a nice meal.
Hey, Forrest, that made me think about, we often hear people talk about the side of their house being slapped with a hand or hit with an object. And it made me think before about, well, and I know this from information I get, that they're trying to see how many people are there. But that's a really good point, because if they could, and this happens in nature quite often with predators, if they can get one out of a group to bolt off in a different direction, then it's easy pickings.
Right, exactly. I mean, when he was telling our story, that's what I was envisioning. Watching you can go and watch these videos of African predators chasing the wildebeest or antelope or whatever, and that's what they do until and all it does is take one of them just becomes so fearful that it'll bolt, thinking that's the proper action. That's really their death right there.
Right. And another thing that gets me is I've heard comments from people saying, oh, well, they were just curious. You didn't have to shoot through the wall at it. You probably instigated it, type of thing. And I disagree with that, because the look in its eyes, they were like translucent black marbles. But when it turned and fixed its gaze on me, it was within 2 seconds, microseconds. I knew within myself I was food. Like I can't express how I knew it. It was just something unlocked, something primal that is just like defend yourself. It wasn't a curious venture.
Hey, Fred, what are your folks, the native folks there? What's their opinion of these creatures? I mean, what's their outlook on them?
Not our friends. They're man stealers. They'll take your women and children. They'll take, lone hunters, that type of thing. There's never that I've heard any good type of interaction. It's all related to stay away, don't follow, don't go chasing strange noises in the woods, especially whistling. Never, whistle alone in the woods or even with people. Because you could attract the hairy man. And it's, I don't know. There's so many experiences that happen in that same area as well that are very similar to what happened to us. And they all go down the line of, oh crap, there it is. There's some gunfire, and then the creatures will either vacate the area totally, or they'll stick around the outskirts and continue to try to find a weak point type of deal.
I think it's very interesting. You guys brought up the point about how in Alaska the natives call him the hairy man, and that's pretty universal for such a large area. When you come down into Canada or the lower 48, it seems like different tribes have different names, but actually if you go in kind of a sequential order, if you're going from north to south, the names don't change a whole lot as you move across geography, but it's just an interesting observation of mine.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I mean, I communicate with, natives from, Vancouver, BC, and some more local as far as like some Inupiaq, Athabascans, some Tlinkits. But yeah, it's been a universal type of thing with even from like the Kuskokwim Delta area, the Yukon drainage area, that it's all the same. They'll take your women and children. Be careful going out at night. Just things of this nature. That is, I haven't heard of one. That help you pick berries or weave a basket or that type of thing. I haven't heard any oral history of a forest friend or any kind of thing like that. So I mean, and I kind of chalked that up to Alaska's vastness. I mean, Forrest, you've been up here. You know what I'm talking about. Alaska's immense.
Yeah, I don't think people realize just how large that region is.
No, you could literally fit like 19 states into this state, and not all small ones either. So it is very big.
Well, and let me interject this. That I mean, I lived in the Palmer-Wasilla Valley, Matanuska Valley. You know exactly where I'm talking about, and had to drive into Anchorage to work. And my husband, being military, we had 3 bags that were always kept in the trunk of the vehicle at all times it had survival supplies in there, because you never knew what could possibly happen just in that short trip from the Palmer-Wasilla area into Anchorage, Alaska. And so we were always prepared, and it was kept there. Those 3 bags were kept in there all the time with blankets and different supplies, water, and we had the survival type blankets. You know what I'm talking about. And anything that could prepare us if we got stuck somewhere and we were in our vehicle, so that we wouldn't die.
Yeah. I currently live in Wasilla, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I live more towards Hatcher's Pass, but yeah, it's.
You're further out then, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Fred.
I lived off a trunk road.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not far from Hatcher's Pass.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a question for you, Fred. It's something that comes up periodically in our questions. What do the native folks say about the relationship between, the hairy man and, let's say, brown bears or grizzlies?
They'll kill them and eat them. I actually had a native elder tell me a story of back when they were using sailboats for drift netting salmon. So this was going back. They had went up into Aleknagik over to what we call Bear Bay locally, where Bear Creek stems from. And they were going in there just to set a net for subsistence. And in the wee hours of the morning, they heard thrashing through the woods and heard a bear just making this god-awful noise. And they noticed a hairy man standing on the opposite side of this creek where this bear was heading to. And as the bear got to the creek, it was pounced on by the other hairy man, and the other one came out of the woods, and they tore it apart and were scooping out of its chest cavity and stuff. And they watched that in horror. And there's accounts like that, at least 3 that I've heard. So I think it's adversarial, to say the least, or maybe a target of convenience as far as how they attack them, because they never attack them just one on.
Yeah, I would think something as large as a brown bear might take a little extra help, but we hear that with other cases too. I mean, it's not just something large prey. They'll do the same thing with deer and other animals, and going for the internal organs first. That's kind of a natural, isn't it?
Yes, because your internal organs, such as your liver and heart and kidneys and all that, contain vital vitamins, and that is not unusual for any type of predator to remove those, open up the body cavity and remove those actually first.
Yeah, that's just picturing the visual. I can imagine what it looked like firsthand, just watching. Because these are coastal brownies. These are very large, 1,000-pound plus, 10-foot plus bears. They're not your run-of-the-mill grizzlies in the mountains. These are big bears.
I've heard accounts where a bear will catch wind of one of these creatures being nearby, and they'll run in fear.
Yeah, for miles and miles. I heard an account like that too. These 2 guys, they were hunting caribou up in the Alphabets, just south of the Denali Highway, south of the North Fork of the Golconda River, and they were spotting for caribou across this small valley where they had these little mounds that come up. I wouldn't call them mountains, but they're more like mounds. They just kind of periodically are here and there throughout the tundra and the alders and willows. And they saw a bear come crashing out of the willows and run, and they're from their vantage point, they were able to see for miles, and this bear took off in a straight direction, running for miles. And they panned back to look to see if it was being chased, and all they saw was a dark figure in the willows just standing there. And the bear continued just nonstop until it was out of view. So it beelined, just a straight shot, wasn't stopping for nothing.
And that's not characteristic behavior for a brown bear, since they're, often said they're the top of the food chain as an apex predator. I guess if something is higher up on the chain than you are, you're going to run from it.
Right, and I've seen bears where they'll react startled, but they'll immediately turn right back around and go, okay, you want to? You know what I mean? Like, they may startle for a second, but they usually turn back around and backtrack to do something or scope it out or what have you. But yeah, this thing just, boom, was gone.
What do you think, Forrest?
Well, those coastal brownies are not anything I want to run into. I've seen plenty of the blonde interior grizzlies, and they're not near as big as the coastal brownies. And of course, you get out there on the Kodiak, then of course that's an island. Those things are even bigger. But you know, they come equipped with claws. I mean, large claws. So, you know, to intimidate a grizzly, I don't care what kind of grizzly it is. I mean, it's got to have something that's going to have to instill a lot of fear in it to have one of those take and head in the opposite direction. Because we have encountered them on hunting and in fishing, and they, you know, grizzlies are not something that you want to toy with, and that's why they always tell you don't surprise them, wear bells and such as that. Because the outcome's not usually too good for the human. But I wouldn't want to toy with grizzly. And for one to tuck tail and run like that, you know, it's got to be a creature that's instilling a lot of fear into them.
Yeah, they're not too afraid of humans generally.
No. We had a soldier killed here doing exercises just right outside of Elmendorf base earlier this spring. A soldier was killed. You know, there's a lot of bear attacks that happen in like Eagle River, you know, and that's right in between Wasilla and Anchorage. Closer to.
Yeah.
It kind of, Alaska doesn't care is what I try to tell people. Like, everything is out to kill you. And I say that jokingly, but it's kind of true, because you come across a mama moose, you're going to get your butt stomped to death if you're not aware of it, you know, because they will literally trample you to death.
I don't know which is the worst encounter, a moose or a bear. I saw something on moose.
I'd rather encounter a bear myself. I mean, honestly, because a mama moose.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was just going to say here that there's something that's rather important. They have more people that die every year in Alaska from moose killing you than bears.
I can believe that from what I saw on television, a thing about moose, and I never realized they were quite that aggressive.
Oh, yeah. Even in the wintertime, you know, there's videos out there of people on their snow machines, and all of a sudden they come up on a moose on the trail, and it's, you know, ding, 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 the round begins, because that moose doesn't care about that snow machine. It's going to come and try to get you.
You know, it made me think of just now of a guy named Randy that we interviewed some time back, and I can't remember, sorry folks, I don't remember the number of the episode, but he was a moose hunter in Canada and was tracking a moose. I can't remember if he actually saw it first. I think he did. And then the Sasquatch came and actually went through this process of, you know, bringing this moose down and killing it right in front of him.
Yeah, that would be something to watch. You know, I've had people sharing similar encounters where they were moose hunting in the winter, and this moose wasn't moving, and then come to find out it was kind of skewered against a tree.
Really?
Like a tree branch was used to keep it where it was. Yeah, just some weird things out in the woods. Yeah, just experiencing what I have, and then other people sharing with me what they've experienced. Just like, are they our friends? I don't think
so.
Not me personally, you know. And I try to listen to other channels just to see what's going on around the world, kind of deal. And there's so much of it that I can't even, because I can't relate to any friendly encounter. I have no reference point. It's been all, you know, tuck and run, or, you know, open fire. There's never been any kind of nice interactions, you know. My friends don't make me fear for my life, even when I don't see them, you know.
And, you know, I have other Native friends who say the same thing, you know, from the Flatheads in Montana and other areas of Washington State, where these are not friendly. They're exactly what you describe. And they say point blank that they will come and eat you.
Yeah, well, I've never been told they're going to teach you how to weave a basket or anything like that.
Well, look at Portlock. Portlock is a prime example. and I can't remember, what was the other? There was actually 2 villages involved over there in that. All those natives worked for the cannery there, and they had, good jobs and everything, but yet hunters kept going up in the mountains, disappearing. There was, and I think there was individuals actually disappearing from within the village, and there was too much stuff going on as far as fish that was being stolen, and those people just packed up and absolutely moved out of both of those villages into, what is it, Nanalook and Port Grantham over there. They actually moved their 2 villages and went to 2 other villages that were farther inland.
Yeah,
and
farther yeah.
And Fred, I don't know if
And
you're,
actually,
I don't know if you're willing to talk about it, but you were telling me some time back here that there was a village you knew about where the hairy men were coming in and actually challenging the men of the village in broad daylight, to the point where they had to evacuate women and children out of the village to 2 other locations away from there.
yeah, I've been talking to a person that I'm going to interview on that, on a one-on-one interview. But yeah, it was to a point to where all boundaries were being pushed. There was even a kid talking about seeing them leap over buildings running from rifle fire to run them off. It didn't matter if it was broad daylight or whatnot. And that particular place isn't that far from, as the crow flies, from where we had our experience up the Nuyakuk River. And there's so many instances that people dismiss outright as just fanciful, and it's disheartening, because you would think, you could trust the oral history of a people that have been in the area for thousands of years, versus something you read in a book in a university that's been a brick building standing for maybe 300.
You would certainly think so. That brings me to a point I wanted to address. There was, I try not to pick on people who make comments on YouTube, but there was one person at Forrest, I know you read the comment,
yes,
was wondering why we were so interested in, the physical aspect, comparing them to apes, etc., and why we weren't open to portals and UFOs and all these other bizarro suggestions or ideas. And quite plainly, it's because, number one, with native folks like Fred and natives' long history with the creatures, and they actually predate. I've talked to native friends who said, oh yeah, these creatures are here when our people came to these regions. So they predate humans, and there's never, in my opinion, been anything that supports these other crazy theories.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything like that. Now, I've seen some crazy lights out in the wilderness, and things like that, but never was it, a crazy light and there's a hairy man attacking. There's never been anything connecting the two. And as far as portals go, that wasn't me. But as far as the whole portal thing goes, I have seen these things have such natural camouflage that once they get into the woods, you can't see them unless they want you to see them. They blend in like a baby duckling going in the grass. I mean, instantaneous. It appears they disappear, but they don't. They just blend in.
Well, and I think, Tom and I talked about that comment that was made, and that doesn't bother me in the least, because, I'm an anthropologist. That's where I'm going to come from, is the primate background, and that's what I think they are. And I think, in all consideration, I think that the majority of people actually feel that they are primates, and it remains to be seen how close they are to humans, or whether they're closer to, say chimpanzees or gorillas or such as that. But I mean, the fact is that 99% of our DNA is shared with chimps and humans. So it would only make a small percentage of that would leave us not sharing that with, say, Bigfoot. If we ever had the opportunity to get a DNA sample, valid, let me say that, a DNA sample from a Bigfoot, they just recently, through extensive DNA testing of bonobos in Africa, that they have found out that bonobo chimpanzees actually share 1.6% of their DNA with humans, but yet they do not share that same DNA with the common chimp, which is the pan troglodytes. So there's all sorts of interesting things that are being found out all the time with by scientists. And, you know, it remains to be seen what's going to end up happening when we ever do get a valid sample of DNA from Bigfoot as to which end of the spectrum they belong on.
You know, I think it's interesting. Everybody, because of what they see on TV or in colleges, they believe that we know everything about the natural world, and we don't.
Oh, no. No.
Yeah. What I saw looking at me in the eyes looked Native American around the eyes and the cheekbones, but had a very flat nose to the face and a very broad nostril opening that face down. It looked way more human than what I would even consider like gorilla-like. It was definitely. I got that image just seared into my memory. But yeah, the noises they made were like some of the hoots and the whoops and whatnot are just, they're so loud. They're so, well, I mean, William, you know, you've been out in the field. I'm sure you've heard it. I mean, many.
We were out just a couple weeks ago and heard all kinds of things. And I know Tom was, that was him trying to call me, by the way, the phone call. Sorry about that, folks. But I had to put him off. We recorded a lot of things, and we're still going through just tons and tons of audio and video. But things that we heard, and, you know, Tom messaged me earlier and said, oh, you know, we Googled nighthawks. Well, you know, nighthawks were not the things we were hearing. You know, some of the smaller noises and things you could dismiss that as birds. You know, but when you're out at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and there's these loud bangs, we heard screams. Actually, there was only one vocal I would say that was a legitimate scream. Some of them there were a lot of grunts for us. There were a lot of gorilla type grunts that we got one night. Mm-hmm. Actually, there were 3 in one location. We drove out of there because we felt like we were interrupting a deer hunt. I told the guys that, you know, based on airflow where the deer would be, and it was exactly right. We saw the deer where they should have been for that time of day, and that's when we started hearing them on both sides of us. So we decided to leave the area, to leave them to their hunt. We drove down about half mile to a mile to a lower location and ran into something very similar down there, only these were louder. And I'm pretty sure it was, you know, 2 different groups, probably part of the same group, but they were more spread out. But there was one vocal that was kind of it was a long, loud moan. And we heard that as we were actually driving through the area and stopped, and we never heard it again. But that's when these other grunts started going. So it was very interesting.
Yeah, and you know, there's no mistaking owls don't weigh 800 pounds and hoot that long or loud, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
that's exactly it. You know, the Sasquatch noises are much longer and louder, much louder. I've heard things that were just, you know, screams that were so loud, they were almost deafening.
Right, and they can still imitate things perfectly. Like, I have an elder relative, Elizabeth Osterhaus. She and her, another one of our cousins back in 1967 were lured out of their apartment on Unalaska Island by one of these things imitating a known baby crying. Like, the level of cunning to prey on a woman's natural desire to protect a baby and using a known baby cry to lure them out, to me, is a level of cunning that is just wow. You know what I mean? Like, that's above any kind of just dumb animal.
It's humanistic, or very similar. What do you think, Forrest?
Well, yes, it's humanistic, but like I always say, a primate is a primate is a primate, and primates are highly intelligent. The only difference in primates' inability to have speech is that they don't have the neural control and the brain that we have. If every primate had a brain just like a human, they'd all be able to speak, and then we wouldn't be having this discussion because they would be included in the discussion. They could voice their opinions, but obviously they can't do that. But primates all are highly intelligent. Gorillas, chimpanzees, each group has its own individual way of acting and, reacting to the environment that they're in. And like I always say, primates in the wild are really reactive to their environment. We are not that way. We try to control our environment. Primates don't do that. But they're highly intelligent, and we have to realize that we're dealing with something that in some respects may be far smarter in the woods than we are. So I rest my case.
I have no doubt that they are far more intelligent than us in the woods, just from what I've seen with my own eyes and how they move and how quick and just seamlessly they could disappear into the background but still be right there. They're not invisible. It's just they have mastered blending in with their environment.
Well, just from their posture, they would blend in if they didn't move. I was pointing out to the guys in the field in this recent outing we went on, as you're moving through this country, the types of forest and things. I said, look, number one, if you're in a vehicle alone driving, you're not going to be looking left and right. Typically, a little bit, but visibility isn't very far. And only if something is moving would you register it. And even if other people in the car were looking out the window nonstop to see something, if one of these things were simply standing still, it might appear as a stump or even a tree trunk.
Yeah, I've had people share experiences like that with me where they looking at a big tree stump that there's no way a tree stump that big could be there. And then lo and behold, there's eyes in it,
Or it walks off,
Yeah, stands up all the way and walks off, and they thought it was big to begin with, and then it gets bigger, kind of expands in front of them and walks off. I don't mean to make light of it. I just, the visual image of what was going on in front of their eyes. And like, I have people tell me about their experiences that they haven't shared with anyone in 30 years, and it's usually typical, been going to this place forever, never had an instance until this one day, this one weird sound, and then they no longer go hunting. The vast majority of them rarely set foot back in the woods again.
Oh, I can sympathize, believe me. Well, what do you have for updates for us, Fred?
Just been trying to do the Alaskan thing, trying to get local natives and just fellow Alaskans to share what they've experienced, and I've just been compiling them on a map at my website so people can go through and, whether they choose to accept it or not, they can at least have a reference point of, oh, this area, this happened, this is what these people dealt with. And it's not to sit there and try to scare anybody. Right. It's to let them know, hey, there's potential for this.
They should be aware. They should be aware of it. It's just like grizzlies or brown bears or anything else, or moose. You should be aware of what the potential is.
Right, because at every trailhead, there's a sign that tells you about the trailhead, and on that same sign, it says, be bear aware. Mm-hmm. It's like, just be aware. It's not that you'll see one or that, it's out to get you or, per se, but the potential is there, One of our next little trips we're going to go on is up by Tulsana, the mud volcanoes. I heard there's some relatively fresh upside down trees stuck into the ground up that way, and that kind of intrigued me. But I'm not an investigator. My culture is stay away, don't follow. So this is all new to me as far as going out into the field.
What is
one place? Huh?
Well, I was going to say, what does your culture say about if you do encounter one? What do you do?
Don't look at it and back away. But I don't know how how effective that is. I haven't heard anyone tell me, at least within close proximity, that they backed away. Usually what ends up happening with people is they'll notice it and continue walking the direction they were going, unless it was right in front of them. But it typically ends with someone running away, not backing away calmly.
Forrest, what's your advice in that situation? You know how other primates, how to deal with them.
Well, it's always good to give, it's always easy to give advice because that would be the perfect scenario. You never, really, seriously, you never look a primate directly in the eyes, especially a male, because they can take that as a direct challenge to them. So that is actually very good advice. You don't, you can actually be aware of the presence and the location of something. We all know that with our eyesight, and calmly back away. But you know what? Let's face it. Who in the hell's going to be real calm when you're confronted with something that might be 8 to 10 feet tall and weighing in at probably 1,000 pounds, and all of a sudden it's staring at you? So I can certainly respect the fact that somebody might tuck tail and run. So that's just a natural reaction. So, but I do want to spread if I can. Now this was something. The first time I ever saw this was in Alaska, and in fact we were driving up the coastal highway, and we had come into. I take that back. I did see it on one time on the coastal highway. You know what I'm talking about, in Canada, there, and then we came into Canada, and I kept seeing periodically. It wasn't a lot of them, but just every once in a while you'd see these trees that are turned upside down with the root balls in the air. And my husband's explanation was, oh, that's, the timber companies have probably, done that. Well, this was on the side of the road, so I couldn't feature why the timber companies would have been down on the side of the road, and it didn't look like there was any type of timbering activity going on there. So what is your take on that? I have always wondered about that, and I have never asked anybody about it.
Right. Well, culturally speaking, we were always told, you see those types of things, you don't go that direction. Basically, it would be considered a boundary marker of some kind, kind of like the natives in King Kong. You know how they'd have their fences up and stuff. Yeah. Don't continue that way. Along those lines.
Well, do you think Bigfoot's doing that, or do you think it's other creatures?
Oh, I have no doubt it's the hairy man. But then again, from what I've seen and with my experiences, someone could easily say, well, you're biased. Someone could have pulled a prank or whatever. Well, I filmed in a location earlier this season at Eklutna Lake, and it's not a very, it's all of Alaska is remote, but it's fairly close to the city. And where I was filming, I was filming right next to an upside down tree, but it had been there so long that the base of it had kind of rotted and it kind of leaned over. But that thing, we couldn't pull it out of the ground. There was no way machinery or a person could have just turned it upside down and shoved it that deep into the ground. Even a strong wind couldn't have flipped that tree to make it do that. And there's so many unknowns, because the speculation drives me nuts, but it also drives me forward to kind of seek a better understanding. And William has.
Hey Fred, how big are these trees typically? Are they all kind of the same size, or are they different sizes?
No, they're big. They're big.
Yeah,
big trees.
They were big.
Yeah, they're not little bitty trees driven into the ground like a spear. No, we're talking about some trees that are probably 3 and 4 feet around. No, they're big.
Yeah, the one I saw was probably about 2 foot around where it was stuck into the ground. But at Eklutna Lake there's a lot of gravel as well, just under the topsoil, just by how geographically it is or whatever. But it was down there. We spent probably an hour trying to dig around it to see how deep it was, just to kind of capture that on video, and we couldn't. It was impossible to wrestle just the root ball around was probably over 1,000 pounds.
I wonder, I was thinking, about the creatures, the mechanics behind it. Would they be able to just pick it up and jam it in the ground? Or is it something maybe they dig the hole, slide the tree in, fill it in, and, stand it up that way?
Well, if you got...
That's a good question.
And then can address this too, around the rivers and such around there. I never saw one directly on the banks, but I did see them up on the where the cut banks are, and then up above there, that first level, usually above the rivers, you could see them. But there's a lot of glacial drift and such in that area, and I think the soil would be fairly easy for something that's strong and powerful to be able to drive something like that into the ground.
Yeah, because from what I saw, not even a group of 10 very strong guys could have manipulated that thing and drove it in the ground like that.
I would think you'd probably even need a group of these things to be able to do that to one tree.
Yeah.
Well, you're probably right there.
That's a lot of weight with one of those trees.
Definitely. Yeah, because even moving firewood around, a couple 100-pound log on your shoulder when you're walking around, it's not easy.
It gets heavy pretty quick.
Yeah. Oh, very, very quick. No matter how much technique you use, bend with your knees and all that stuff, it's still a couple 100 pounds on your shoulder. There's no way out of that.
Now, Forrest, you've had a series of things going on your property. Anything recent there?
Well, no. I sent you those pictures of what I found. Y'all were out and about in the woods there when I sent that to you. You did get those, didn't you?
Yeah,
I know I
did.
sent them to Tom.
I think Tom sent them to me. I'd have to look. I've been so busy, since we got back. We were averaging 18-hour days in the field for a solid week, and like I say, just so much to go through. And when we're done recording, I'll talk to you guys about some of that stuff, kind of give you an update of what we got. And for the public, we'll be putting that out in the future. But I'm not going to talk much about that yet because that's a project we're working on.
Well, I hadn't. I'll tell you exactly what transpired. I was so happy because I hadn't had any problems there, and I thought really it was probably because we had to shut everything up and close all the windows and such because of the heat, and I had the AC going, so that that was probably why I wasn't having any more window visitors. And anyway, I went out about 8:30 in the morning to go let the cats out of their cat house and open the door, and I have a place. My water faucet is on the back side of the trailer. And I went out the back door, went down the porch, and it always drips there. And from we have a connection one that goes into an area for me to water the backyard, and then I have a hose that's strung out underneath the trailer, and it goes to some water tanks that are on the other side of the fence that I just put water in on the other side of the fence. And so it drips there at this area. So it's like got about a 3 or 4 foot circumference of just wet area there. And I had filled up the water tanks the night before, so it was pretty damp there. And I always step across it, and the cats run around it. And I went out there and I opened up the cat house. And I didn't look down at that point in time. I don't know why I didn't, but I just didn't. And I came back around, and I stopped when I looked there, and I thought, wait a minute. And it's not unusual for me to see, I have a pet raccoon I told you about, and it's not unusual for me to see Ricky's footprints in there or cat footprints or anything like that. But cats actually try to avoid it. They don't like to get their feet wet. So they'll either walk around it or jump over it. So I didn't see any prints until I came back the other way, and I'm like looking at this print, and I thought, wait a minute, that looks like a human footprint, a barefoot human footprint. And then I got to looking, and there was a couple of more there. And I wished that I'd had some something to cast a print, I think I could have. It would have even been better if I'd had something to cast the prints there, and that way I could have actually looked and seen if there was any type of lines or anything in there. But I tried to take as good of pictures as I could have. They didn't turn out as well as I would have liked them to. But that's really the only thing that I've had happen, and I thought that was rather unusual that they would have walked. That meant that they must have walked right up to my porch.
What would have concerned me is when did they make the tracks? Before, after you walked past there momentarily,
No, I think they were there. I think it happened during the night, Fred. I don't think they did it while I was, out and about, because this was during the morning, and I haven't had any daylight run-ins with them. So I think that they would have probably been there the night before. I just didn't look down when I went through there. And when I came back, that's when actually the footprint was coming from the direction that I was coming. It was actually, the footprint showed to be going up towards the porch. So I don't think I actually would have seen it as clearly when I was going down the path to go let the cats out as I did when I came back. It was quite clear to me at that point in time, there is a human footprint there, or a human type footprint there. The only thing was it was, when I put my foot, I kind of held my foot up next to it, and it was much longer than my footprint, about 2 inches, a good 2 inches. And I couldn't imagine. You don't walk around in Texas in bare feet at night with the grass burrs and such that we got out here. My son can attest to that. He still remembers when he ran out in the front yard here when he was 3 years old. He's never forgotten it and came back with both feet loaded with grass burrs. So you just don't do that here in Texas.
Yeah, I could imagine. We were in a spot, we went up a trail, and it had recently, after it rained, this is just a little while back, maybe a month ago, and on the trail up, we saw nothing, and it started raining, and on the way back, there wasn't full-on tracks, but you could see where something had been crossing our back trail a couple different times. It wasn't a bear because it was bipedal. You could tell by the steps and the impressions in the tundra, and it seemed to avoid the mud at all cost. It was like, I don't know, like a stalking behavior, but that's speculation, of course, but the feelings we had in that area were immense. So we just kind of just backed on out of there, because I'm just, with what I went through, it's hard for me to fully engage, like, oh, let's follow these tracks, or let's go see what, is this direction, because I already know. And I'd like to get some evidentiary footage, in 4K crystal clear, but the other part of me is like, no.
Yeah, do you really want to do that?
Yeah, do you remember the last time, Fred? Do you really, let's rethink this. I'd rather get better footage from a safer place, that's for sure, because we can't move like they can.
Well, listen, we're just about out of time. Fred, would you like to give out any contact information or places where people could go to see what you've got?
Yeah, just my website. It's linked directly to my YouTube channel, so it's subarcticalaskasasquatch.com, and I have an interactive map of the state with markers of encounter locations, and you just click on the marker and it's embedded to my YouTube channel, so awesome. It'll pull up a video of what happened in that area.
Well, Fred, it's always a pleasure. We have to have you back on a regular basis. Folks, stay with me a moment. Everyone, thanks for joining us, and stay tuned for the Q&A in a couple days.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out